By the time children about 6 or 7 years old, you can already predict their trajectory. 90% of brain development happens in the first 5 years. 250 million children don't have access to education.
Every dollar invested in quality early education returns $6 to $17. That's a better return than any stock market. I hate hearing stuff like that. It's really heavy.
It's demoralizing. When you're in it, it's sad.
Stop asking kids, what do you want to be when you grow up? What impact are you going to have on the world? The biggest lie we tell ourselves about education in Singapore.
That it works for everybody. I had patients who had not seen their children for decades, and their biggest wish is to reconcile.
You got me in tears. Hello and welcome to Growing Pains by HoneyKids Asia, the podcast for conversations you want to have after the kids go to bed. In each episode, we talk to people who've been there and done that. They're experts, they're the parents, they're the ones that will say what everyone is thinking but nobody's saying. You're not alone in this, we've got you. All right, let's jump into today's episode. Here's a question that keeps me up at night. What are we actually supposed to be teaching our kids right now? The world they're growing up in looks nothing like what ours did. AI is expected to transform 300 million jobs globally. Employers say 39% of skilled workers will need to change by 2030, and that's before you factor in the climate crisis, reshaping where and how we live. Meanwhile, 250 million children worldwide can't even get to a classroom. The gap between those who get a quality education and those who don't is growing, not shrinking. Today's guest looked at all of this and decided to do something about it. Dr. Elaine Kim is a medical doctor who spent over a decade in palliative care looking after people at the end of their lives. And what the dying taught her about what actually matters led her to building Trehaus, a preschool that's redefining early education in Singapore and Jakarta, and Little Lab, an AI-powered platform designed to bring that education to children everywhere, including communities that have never had access to it. She's a mum of 4 and the only person I know whose dinner conversation covers both what's for dessert and how we're going to close the global economic gap using artificial intelligence. We're talking about what our children really need, what school should look like now, and why the most important skills for the AI world are the ones we barely teach. Lane, it's so great to have you here. We've been friends for a long time. But before I begin, this might be a hard question to answer, but what's the one single takeaway you think listeners should take from the conversation we're going to have today?
So going straight into the hard questions. It's so good to be here. Thank you for having me. So I think that, the world that we're living in obviously has a lot of change that's happening, a lot of challenges that we're facing. But I like to think I'm really hopeful and optimistic. So I'm hoping that at the end of this, perhaps I might be able to, impart a little bit of that hope and optimism and maybe create a little bit of an inspiration for the work that we need to do to turn that hope into actual reality, right? To make that world a bit better for our kids. And maybe even particularly in the area of education, which I believe is at the core, at the center of the greatest impact and legacy that we can leave. If there can be a little bit of inspiration to anyone who's listening to say, hey, this is an issue that we really need to address, and to start thinking, what can I be doing to make that change happen? That would be great.
Okay. And Elaine, you're a doctor. You spent years in palliative care, sitting with people in the last days of their lives, and then you left medicine to build a preschool. It's a pretty wild ride, really. How do you connect those dots? And what did being around the dying teach you about raising children?
Well, so, actually it was a huge privilege to be in the place of doing palliative care. It's not just the patients that you're looking after. It's entire families and communities, and you're with people in the last days of their lives. Usually my patients had less than 3 months of life expectancy left. And what we usually like to say is that our work was not about adding days to life, but about adding life to days. And it was deeply impactful. I think it helped me to remember almost every day with these patients what is important, right? Because I think we get so caught up in the lives that we live and just like our own little worlds, and just spending time with patients in their last days and the families that you're supporting helps you to remember what really matters. And nobody ever says, oh, I wish I had spent a little bit more time in the office, right? Like they're always saying, I wish I had spent more time with my family, with the people who matter to me, and also thinking about their legacy, right? What am I leaving for the kids that I brought into this world? What am I leaving when I go, right?
Now, you've said that a child's trajectory in life is largely decided by the age of 7, and that early education is the highest ROI investment we can make. And most people have no idea how important that is.
Yeah.
Can you unpack that for us?
Oh my goodness, absolutely. I think so I've always thought about what's the biggest impact that I can be making with my life. And, it was coming through some research, and there's so much research out there that just shows that by the time children about 6 or 7 years old, you can already predict their trajectory, their outcomes at adulthood based on whether or not they'd had access to early childhood education. And I think there's a lot of wonderful work that's being done in education through the primary school years, through tertiary education. However, by the time kids are 7, that gap is already this chasm. And all these efforts are sort of like trying to bridge it slightly. But if you think about it, like 90% of brain development happens in the first 5 years. Most of people's, their foundations in terms of character, all of that it's also created in those first 5 years. Even research about early childhood development and neurodevelopment, you learn that synaptically, right? Like even things like learning a language or learning concepts of numeracy or whatever, these different things that we take for granted when they're children, these learnings happen only during a small window between like 3 to 7, it peaks. And for example, language, if you haven't been exposed to it past the age of 7, your ability to learn a language just drops dramatically. So it's such a crucial period of time, and early childhood education, if you look at the research, is so incredibly important. And I don't think people realize that enough. And if you think about things also from a ROI in terms of impact, I think that, the research points to the fact that solving things by providing access to early childhood education probably has like a larger ROI for impact than any other thing that you could be doing. I think there was an economist who said that something like for every dollar that's invested into early childhood education, actually something like there's a return of maybe $5 to $15 for that same amount. And
yeah, I think it's the Nobel Prize winning economists found that every dollar invested in quality early education returns $6 to $17.
Yes,
and that's
right.
a better return than any stock market.
Yeah.
And yet 251 million children can't get access to a classroom. So how has that impacted you, and how's that maybe we can jump into Little Lab, because that addresses that, right?
Yes, absolutely. And that was the really stark contrast for me, right? Like the fact that 250 million children don't have access to education. And I think that's one statistic. There are a bunch of different statistics that tell you a much more dire picture. And I think that one of the biggest issues that we face in this world is inequality. And I think a lot of it stems from education inequality. And if you want to solve for that inequality, again, because of the gap that is formed already within the early years, the real solution is in trying to bridge that gap early. And I think that's what's been driving all the work that I've been doing in the past, 5 years or more, really this whole question of if this is such the big issue, if this is the thing that can make the most impact, if this is the thing that can bridge that gap in inequality, which is the root of so many problems in this world, why are we not solving it? What is it going to take to solve it? And what can I do to make that a reality? And that's really my purpose that's been driving me. And the whole reason why everything that I've been working on, whether it's, Trehaus schools or whether it's Little Lab, the EdTech platform, all of it is around trying to provide access to high quality early education to every child, regardless of their background, regardless of where they're born, whether you're in a developing country or a developed country, a low income community or like whatever. It doesn't matter where you're born. Everyone should get access to really good, life-changing early childhood education that's going to give them that leg up for the world that they're going to grow up in and bridge that gap in inequality.
And how does Little Labs do that?
I guess we always start with what the actual problem is, right? If you really dig deep into what is the issue, like people don't know enough, but I think there is generally a consensus that yes, early childhood education is good for you. We should educate our children, right? You'd be surprised. Some people are like, oh, do you need to? But yes, you do. you absolutely need early childhood education. Is crucially important to shape lives of children across the world. So education is one thing in terms of like educating people that it's important is one thing. But I think the big fundamental issue, if you really dig into it, is a resource issue. There's just not enough people who can provide it, right? There are not enough teachers, period. There's just not enough teachers. But even where there are teachers, they're usually not trained in early childhood education. They don't understand what it means to teach young children, which is a little bit different from teaching in a school and, the way they develop and everything. There's a lot of research out there about how young children learn. And most teachers, unfortunately, are not even aware of what that means. Even where you do have trained teachers in early childhood education, they're often overworked, they're underpaid. It's a huge turnover in the industry. And there's just not enough resources, And so really, if that's the fundamental issue, the question was, how do we solve for that? How do we create people who can become these educators? How can we provide for that, right? So in that way, Little Lab was kind of created because it's part of actually a wider ecosystem that I feel needs to be developed, which I am in the midst of putting together the different pieces. So foundationally, we developed a pedagogy called the Trehaus method, which basically distills out what early childhood education needs to be, takes the best elements of things you might have heard of, like Montessori, Reggio Emilia, all of these things. We take that into our pedagogy so that we're able to impart that to people so that they can impart it to the children. So that's on a foundation. And then the next part is how do we then train people or give them the tools to be able to deliver it, right? And so this is where Little Lab comes in, where, we are really believers in using tech for good. So a lot of people think of EdTech, education technology, and they think, oh, it's like going to be an app or a tool that a kid uses and it replaces teachers. We really believe, particularly early childhood education, that's not going to work. So we're all about using tech and AI for good, not to replace the humans, but to really empower them to be able to be more human and more present for the children. So you can't replace that human parent, child, teacher, student, caregiver, child sort of like interaction that needs to happen. That's the core of how kids learn. And so what our technology does is it turns somebody who may or may not have any background in teaching or early childhood education, and we can turn them into an early childhood educator. So we can...
So it supercharges their abilities.
It supercharges their abilities. There's two pillars to it. One is a teacher training academy where we basically have distilled what you need to know for early childhood education into a really very fundamental, accessible, affordable way to impart that knowledge. And then Little Lab has the teaching toolbox, which is a tool. It's almost like a little mentor that they have to be able to guide them. It learns, and it's AI powered. So it learns about that teacher or caregiver, whoever's using it, learns about them, learns about the children that they're teaching. And it guides them with kind of like a Netflix for content. Like if you think about it,
personalized?
Yeah. So it's personal. So basically the teachers will go on, and there's all this content that's out there. And for education to be done right in early childhood, it's these play-based and project-based lessons that need to be delivered to kids based on what their interest is, what their levels are. It needs to be customized to them. But very few teachers are able to deliver that. There are very few teachers are able to observe the children, figure out what the kids need, figure out what they're supposed to teach their children, and then deliver it, right? So we replace all that. So we've got like a content library of like hundreds to thousands of different projects and lessons that have been written by PhDs and masters in education. It's held in a library, a content portal basically. But the algorithms that basically learn about the teacher and who they're teaching, and then it'll give them a custom curriculum that they can then deliver to their children that is scaffolded, play-based, project-based, and it gives them step-by-step instructions on what they need to do.
That's very cool. Yeah. That's very cool. Now, every parent I know is really panicking about AI right now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when I meet people, a lot of people say, how old are your kids? And I say 16, 14, 11. And the next question is, and what do you think they're going to do? And my eldest two both love coding. And when I say that to people, their faces kind of change. Like, okay, so you've got a problem ahead for you, right? Because, if they do a degree in coding, will it be completely worthless?
Yeah.
I mean, the World Economic Forum says 39% of core skills will change by 2030. And I think it's really interesting. You've got 4 kids you're raising. What's your view? Have you got any coders at home? Have you got any kids into coding?
Actually, my oldest one is extremely interested in it. And I've always been a believer that this was something that, now people are talking about AI, but even like a few years ago when we started building that foundation that I told you about, that pedagogy, that Trehaus method, a big part of it was really thinking about what are the jobs that are going to be present in the future? What are the skills that our kids are going to need? And really at the end of the day, we came down to it's human things that are needed, right? Like things like, so in Trehaus, in our Trehaus method, we actually have this head, heart, and hands framework. Head is things like your, numeracy, literacy, STEM, critical thinking. But under heart, we have things like empathy, grit, resilience, creativity, curiosity. Under hands, you have like teamwork, confidence building, communication skills. And these were the things that we really delineated. 21st century skills, this social emotional learning. This is the approach that we need to have in thinking about what our kids need. And so when we built the Trehaus method, which is at that core, that foundation of everything that powers the work that we're doing through Trehaus or Little Lab, it was very much grounded in how do we develop these things. And you think, they might be innate, but no, like things like empathy, things like creativity, these are things that can be nurtured, that can be taught. And we do this very intentionally through our program, through our curriculum, through the projects. What our kids do in the preschools that we run, what our kids the schools that are using Little Lab, their children are doing, the communities, even, we have a big project in Pakistan with about, we work with the Pakistan government. We've got about 10,000 kids who go through the Little Lab program. And we're making sure that these kids, these are, in, rural villages, some really low income urban areas, and whether it's them or the kids in our very, very high end preschool here in Singapore, it's the same things that we need to be nurturing and that we're really trying to deliver through our curriculum, through our pedagogy, through our programs, through Little Lab, through Trehaus. And so this is a topic that's incredibly dear to my heart. And I think that these are the things that become so much more important in this AI world, right? Because you're already seeing it happen so accelerated, right? Like my kids were maybe 3 and they're like, he's really interested in coding and robotics, my oldest one. And I remember by the time he was 7, he'd kind of like aged out of all the programs that were available. And, we had to kind of bring in a private coach to guide him. But it was not really about just teaching him. Sure, he learned Python and like you can learn these coding languages. But I think what was more important was the fact that he was interested in it. It was the practice of actually learning itself.
Yeah.
You're learning to learn, but you're also learning concepts, right? It's a logic. It's an intellectual challenge, but coding is not like, even when we teach, we have a little engineer program in our preschool. So we have a little lab in Trehaus. We have our Littles program, which is the modules in our content curriculum. We have a little CEO one, which focus on, leadership, executive function. We have a little engineer program, which teaches, a lot of the basics about coding and robotics. We have a little entrepreneur program, which teaches the concepts of problem solving and entrepreneurial skills. We have a little philanthropist program that gets kids to think about how to give back to the world and how to make a difference in this world. We have a little creative program, which gets them to think about how to create things. They create rap music and so on and so forth. So we have like these 10 little modules that make up our pedagogy and our curriculum. And in our little engineer program, which was learning about, engineering, coding, robotics, a lot of it was just that conceptual understanding, logic, sequence, problem solving, a lot of these skills that are innate within being an engineer. And by the way, these were written not just by teachers, they're written by actual engineers, actual CEOs, actual entrepreneurs, actual creatives. And we got them to kind of distill what is it actually that is your core skill in what your work entails, and how do we impart that even in a preschool, in the early years, right? In primary school, whatever it is. So that's sort of like the thinking behind it. And so it's not so much the skill itself. It's not so much like learning to code specifically. It's not just about the language, but it's about the ability to understand the conceptual basis of it, the understanding how to learn, right? And basically going through the process of pursuing what you're interested in.
I know you've always said that empathy is the biggest thing that people need to learn. And in a world obsessed with STEM, and it's interesting the topics that you talk about with your little labs, it sounds very, curriculum heavy and career focused for such a young age. But why do you think empathy is the most important thing above everything else?
It goes back to that first question you asked me about how being in palliative care had impacted, my view on what I'm doing with my life, right? And if you think about it, I think everything at the end of the day, what really matters at the end of the day is that human connection. And empathy is at the core of a lot of human connection, right?
Do you think we're in an empathy deficit or an empathy drought in the world right now?
I think you have to define empathy, right, really well. Like, what is it? Right?
So in my mind, I feel like people are becoming more obsessed about themselves and less kind and considerate to others. I think people are being less involved in their community, less engaging with strangers. I think people expect, employers to do more for them. They expect things to be done for them.
Yeah.
Rather than thinking, what can I do?
Yeah. I love that. And, we talked about the little philanthropist program that I did, and that's exactly what we're trying to instill in these kids. Not have them just be thinking, what am I going to be when I grow up? Which is like the question people tend to ask the little children, right? But we want them to be thinking, what can I do to make the world better?
So wouldn't it be great if we could start a campaign where we say, stop asking me what my kids want to do?
Yes.
Or stop asking kids, what do you want to be when you grow up? And change it to what impact you're going to have on the world.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we should do it. We should really do it. We should do it. I think that's a big part of it. I think it also gets dangerous when empathy is like a sentiment, which I fear it is, because it does need to come from a place of genuinely caring about other people. It needs to come from a place of not self-centeredness. And, sometimes things that can look like empathy are not. I
think empathy also comes from a place of generosity. And generosity is only something you can have if you have no fear. And I feel like there's just so much fear in the world, and so many people operate from a place of fear.
Yeah.
And it's difficult to be empathetic if you're operating in a fearful state, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, I do also feel that maybe in the recent generation, I think it was very well-intentioned move towards like supporting people's emotions and feelings so that they can express empathy towards others, to feel and to have empathy towards others and then be able to express it. But it's almost been caught up and misplaced to a degree where the emphasis becomes so much on trying to solve. It becomes about you, like what you're going through, like what you are feeling, what you need, what you should have, what you should, and I think it came from a place of like, let's make sure that you're looked after. But again, it becomes this very fine line where it becomes like inward looking again, where again, you don't have that view of like, what about everyone else, right?
It's a big topic, isn't it?
It's a big topic. And I'm reluctant to go into it because I think it can get extremely charged. And I like to keep things simple. And, if you just take things to the core, I really do believe there is a sense of true selflessness, but that needs to be true, not a virtuous signaling kind of selflessness, not
an authentic.
Yeah, like an authentic, I'm looking outward. I'm looking at others. I'm looking at how it can make the world better, how it can make life better for you. Not because I think it'll be better for you, but because you think it'll be better for you too.
Your husband, John, runs a venture capital firm focused on fighting climate crisis. You're doing a lot of philanthropy work and education, AI with Little Labs. I'm wondering about your dinner table conversations at home. It must be just fascinating that your conversations, but also that your kids, you must be also seeing your kids are inheriting a world shaped by AI and climate change simultaneously. So how do you talk to them about that?
To our kids, I think we're extremely open with the kids about, I really do, like they're involved in our worlds, I guess, right? Like they join dinner conversations with us and other people. When there's a podcast that we want to listen to, we get our kids to listen to it too. Yeah. Or, I think it just having that very open communication is very important because we really don't have any answers to most things, do we? So
does that feel heavy for your kids? Like, I mean, I really worry so I've got one kid in particular who's very involved in sustainability and climate, and I just worry about the heaviness of that for a 16-year-old, and I, on the flip side, I don't want to sugarcoat it and I don't want to pretend like it's not a real problem because these kids are going to have to face this reality and they are going to be the ones responsible for a lot of the solutions. But how do you balance that, protecting them but also including them, or including them enough but, I don't know. Do you know what I mean? It's a challenging.
I actually, at the beginning I was saying that I do like to think I'm very hopeful and optimistic about it. So when we talk about these challenges, I don't think it's ever couched in any sort of like heaviness or fear. It's almost like, oh, it's a challenge that we are facing. What are we going to do to solve it? So it's more of like, it's more couched in what are we doing or what is being done or what is a potential solution for all these different problems that we see, you know? So it's almost like galvanizing or encouraging or like, you know, having them think like what we talked about just now, right? Like, no, what are you going to be when you grow up? But what do you want to do that you think is going to make a difference? And yeah.
I think you have to be in a good space to hold that for them in a positive way, right?
Yeah.
I think sometimes I personally get overwhelmed and feel a bit hopeless and and I think it's really common, and I think we can see people turning away from the news because it can just get also heavy.
Absolutely.
Does that ever happen to you?
I mean, yeah, of course. I mean, sometimes it's just like watching the news, and I think obviously it was also sad when I see it happening, the stuff I told you about where, you know, a lot of the funding that we see being given, getting involved in that process and just seeing how much just lost along the way. I think that's sad, you know? And I think that, the fact that people make decisions that are not inherently caring and kind and for the good of other people, it's sad. But I don't know. Again, I think I hold a slightly more positive view where it's like it exists, but again, we can't control what we can't control. And I'm trying to, through my own life and encouraging my kids to like, let's control what we can control, right? And like, let's do what we can within our own sphere of influence. And I think my faith plays a part too, where there is a sense of like purpose and calling that means that even if challenges seem insurmountable, solutions seem impossible, there is that sense of like a higher power, higher purpose, higher calling, God's ability to make things happen, even if they don't seem possible. So kind of holding on to that faith and that hope, I think helps me to have that space, I think.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. You co-founded Crib to empower women entrepreneurs. You were an ambassador for the UN's initiative against the oppression of women. Your mum is an MP. You've raised 3 boys and now have a daughter. What? Oh my God, it's exhausting. What do you want your daughter to grow up knowing about being a woman in the world that the world might not teach her?
Honestly, I feel that there's too much going on in the world with everybody telling women what they should be or what they shouldn't be, what they should want and what they shouldn't want. I almost take a view right now of, I want her to know that she is treasured, she is loved, she is perfect the way she is, no matter what path she takes or what she does. I do want her to give her every opportunity to pursue anything she wants to do. I want her to believe that she can grow up doing anything she wants to do. I want to help create a world and environment where she'll never feel anything stopping her from doing that.
I think to have empowered young women is something the world needs. And I do think a lot of women don't feel that empowerment, which comes from confidence, which comes from love. So that all makes perfect sense.
Absolutely. And I almost want to take it one step further because, yes, I want you to be empowered to feel you can do all these things. And I want you to be empowered to feel that you don't need to be an empowered woman. It's almost like, you know, I've spent my entire life and career like really all about female empowerment. And it's almost like recently I've developed like almost like a deeper layer to what that means. Do you know what I mean? Like not that typical view of like, because that does also box women into thinking that that's what they should aspire to.
Correct.
To be like, you know, somebody who's empowered in that way of achieving and, you know, through career or through whatever it may be, right? And, you know, I think it's saying that, yes, you absolutely can and you don't have to if you don't want to.
I love that.
Does that make
Elaine.
sense?
I love that. All right, I'm going to ask you some quick fire questions. So just come with whatever comes first.
Okay.
First up, what's one thing every school should teach that almost none do?
Empathy.
Too easy. Your kids' screen time rules, honestly.
Oh, nightmare. But yes, evolving collaboratively and quite happy where we're at this moment.
AI in the classroom, is it an opportunity or a threat?
Depends. I'd say opportunity really, really needs wisdom in implementation.
What's the biggest lie we tell ourselves about education in Singapore?
That it works for everybody. I think education in Singapore is great at really educating our population as a whole, but every child is different. I think different kids need a different approach.
Last question. Tell me something a dying patient told you that changed how you parent.
Wow, that's hard. I think it's not one particular patient, but it's just watching. One of the most fulfilling things that I did in my work in palliative care was reconciliation. So when patients are dying, we ask them, what's your deepest wish? And we always try to help to fulfill it. That's a big part of our job as palliative care doctors. And I had patients who had not seen their children for decades. And their biggest wish is to reconcile with them. And when that reconciliation happens, that is maybe one of the most impactful things that again reminds me back to the beginning, what really matters, right? It's that human connection.
You got me in tears. Thank you so much, Elaine. That was really great.
Oh.
Whew.
Thank you for having me and for letting me share.
Oh, you're amazing. So, wow, that really moved me, that conversation. Now, the hardest thing for this podcast is I really want to try and summarize this conversation in 3 takeaways that you can take with you today. I think the first one is early education isn't a nice to have. It's the single highest return on investment we can make, not just in our own children, but in children around the world. And that 85% of the brain develops before the age of 5. And that 250 million children are missing that window entirely. And that's not their problem. That's all of our problems. The next one, I think, is really about empathy. And I suppose empathy and creativity and kindness, it's all skills that are difficult to teach, but I think Elaine's example of how she's using empathy to really solve for a real need, it was a really great example with her Bridge the Gap work. And a final thing is I really loved the way Elaine spoke about having time in your day to really take a breath, take a pause and appreciate what you're doing and think about your impact. Oh, I've got one more. Sorry. I want to remember not to ask children what they want to be when they grow up, but what impact they want to have. That's all for Growing Pains this week. If this hits home, please share it with a parent who needs to hear exactly what they're looking for. If you're sick of people asking your children what are they going to be when they grow up, please share this with your grandparents or your neighbours, and maybe we can help rewire that really repetitive narrative. Subscribe wherever you listen so you don't miss an episode, and we'll see you next time.